welcome to the Game Dev London podcast. I'm your host for today, Gianluca, and joining me is Game Dev London co-founder and friend Stuart Ville. How you doing, Stu?
I'm good. Good to be back podcasting. It's been a while for me.
Yeah? Yeah, when was the last time?
Well, I say it's been a while. It feels like it's been forever. Probably uh, it's a good few episodes back. I think it was me and Chris,
Oh, yeah. I
maybe.
think I
Yeah,
think I remember taking a look at that. Something to do with player experience. Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah.
Well, this episode's a little different to usual, I think, in the sense of, for the most part, the GDL podcast tends to be hosted by experienced devs who had some professional roles. They can talk about their experience in a certain area or their knowledge about a certain detail within the industry. Whereas this time it's hosted by me, who isn't necessarily an experienced dev, but what I can lend an ear to and talk about is trying to get into the industry and transitioning from an existing career into trying to get into game dev, because I started my journey into game dev like 9 months ago, and have learned a load since then and been helped by a load of people, including you, to get to this point where I am now. And I think that leads us on to the question of the day, which is what can devs do to support and nurture the next generation, and those trying to get into game dev, and what the community can do to support those people. Now, I've had to think about this, obviously, personally, and
hmm
categorized in my head what people can do. But I think it's important before we get into that to talk about our personal experiences getting into the industry, and who helped us, and what we how we found it ultimately. So I guess I lead with that question. How did you break in? What did you end up doing? Did anyone help you out? What happened?
So kind of yes and no. Um, and but also, that's it's kind of part of the reason why I started developing Game Dev London in the first place. Because when I started my journey, it felt like a bit of a lonely one.
Hmm.
Um, and then I started going to what was then Game Dev Lunch, and I met Jade, and some other devs. And at the time, like everyone was cool and friendly, but it felt like the people who were experiencing some kind of success, or um, their indie studios were doing quite well or whatever. It felt like they weren't sharing um, as much as they could be.
Hmm.
I always felt like I was finding something out after I tried to do it myself. Um,
Okay.
and and so yeah, so I kind of wanted to flip how that worked. So
Hmm.
everything that I learned, I started to just share with everyone. And I think the community that we've got now, everyone shares everything all the time. You can literally jump into the Game Dev London um, Discord and be like, "Hey, I'm new. Does anyone know anything about this?" And you'll get like a good few people being like, "Oh yeah, I can help you with that," or "Have you checked out this resource or that resource?" So, um, but yeah, for the most part, for me, early doors, I was kind of just going it alone. Um, but that said, I would say um, Jade was probably the person who kind of helped me out the most, and um, was very welcoming, and I that kind of got me into going to the game dev lunch meetups
Yeah.
on a regular. And then from there, she was like, "Yeah, do you want to be an organizer with me?" Which is like the
Nice.
most welcoming you can get, right? run this
Indeed.
mad ship with me.
Indeed.
Um, yeah, and then I had this idea for the growth of Game Dev London, and here we are.
And the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, that's an interesting story. I didn't know that. I guess I should talk about my perspective.
yeah.
So I had a marketing career, decided to chase a dream, left that job and started a degree in game design. And right now I'm kind of juggling a lot of different opportunities, here and there, including working with GDL, of course, And how I got introduced to you, which is what got me into GDL, was through my lecturer, Tom, who is super active in the community and always helping out. I think he's a limit break mentor at the moment, and he's also done a host of other things, co-founded a host of other things, which I'll talk about later on in terms of how I view that in the context of what devs can do and stuff. But I think it's important to note that there's so many. I've benefited so much from basically just a handful of people's help already, and I think that's why this is a conversation that's important to have, because all it takes is one person doing one small thing that can kickstart a whole load of opportunities for you. And I think that leads on to the next question I was going to ask you, which is, what experiences have you had working with newcomers in the industry and helping them out? Like, what have you been up to anything in that context? I mean, I know that you have, because you've helped me out. So I guess the rest of the story would be good.
So, fairly recently, I started mentoring in a more direct way. Obviously, I've done a lot of networking and creating events, and trying to, especially with the events where we allow or create a space for indie devs to showcase their games. But most recently, I started mentoring in a more direct way. So there's a small indie dev studio, and I'd been thinking about doing it for a while, in this more direct way. And there are studios that are doing really cool and funky things. And I know the guy who's at the head of it is struggling with all the kind of things that I was struggling with when I started my studio. And I now think that I have a bit of a bonus superpower in the fact that my original studio crashed and burned, thanks COVID. I mean, it wasn't just COVID. COVID was the final thing, but so because that happened to my studio just before Christmas last year, and obviously I've got the rebirth of the new studio. There's so many lessons that I learned from that entire process, and just in having conversations with him when he's talking about certain things, I'm like, there's a pitfall there, and it could be a big one. And then he's like, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that," and I'm like, "I know, I didn't at the time either." So I'd like to do more of it, but at the moment, just finding the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, I teach game dev, so I'm trying to. And part of me taking that job was the fact that I wanted to do this whole share the wealth of knowledge that I've gained and stuff, and make sure that the next generation has these opportunities and understands the lay of the land, because when you're first getting into it, there's just so much of it that I think for the most part it's just massively exciting, right? It's something that you found a passion in, and you want to dive in, and you're like, "Oh, I'm just gonna do it all," and that sounds cool. And most of it is, but when you're doing something that you're so passionate about and so excited about, it's really hard to kind of have this heightened top level overview.
Yeah, I think you pointed out a lot of key points there, and a lot of things that that you can dabble in as to support, including stuff like your teaching, professionally as to start with. But I guess I'd pull out the mentoring detail in particular. You kind of spoke about mentoring at a studio level. Kind of I assume you're working one-on-one with the head of the studio. Is that right?
Yeah, currently there are plans in the works that I will do, maybe join some of their morning stand-up meetings and stuff. But at the moment, it's just very kind of top level. He's making decisions that are going to shape the company in ways that you just don't think about when you're starting out, and
That gives
how you manage people and stuff.
Yeah, that I think that gives you a really unique perspective on the difference between mentoring like a student who
Mm.
is trying to get into the industry in whatever way they can or in whatever field they can or discipline, compared to somebody who's founding a studio and looking to manage a successful business ultimately,
Well,
alongside
so
doing their game.
he's actually both. So he
There you go.
he's still studying and starting a studio. So um, it's kind of part of the reason why I thought, it's the perfect person to be mentoring,
Mm,
because there are people who will have started an indie studio, and maybe they've got like a better grasp on things because they've managed stuff before, or there's someone who's a student and is like trying to find their way in, um, and yeah, so he's doing both. So I was
yeah.
like, well, yeah.
What do you think the main differences are in like how the messaging you're delivering, like between those two audiences? Because whilst your current mentee is kind of a mix of both,
Hmm.
um, I feel like just thinking about it, the type of lessons you'd be delivering are probably pretty different between the two.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, with my students, it's a lot more like career based, I guess,
Hmm.
um, and a lot less biz dev.
Yeah,
So it's a lot more like, do you know what? Some of it is like really advice that you could take no matter what job you're getting, because a lot of it is like how you operate in a working world. Like, because my students, a lot of them are, or they're, they've just been studying their whole lives. They're not, a lot of them haven't actually got any work experience as of yet, or they're just starting to get some kind of work experience, and they're finding the minefield that is, being told to do things that you don't want to do, or like how to manage your time effectively, and like, and in some cases, situations where it's like, you're allowed to say no, you're allowed to,
yeah,
put up some barriers, and you don't have to be a slave in any industry. um, so
absolutely.
yeah, it is quite different actually. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I definitely feel like coming in with an existing work experience for me has given
Mm.
me a leg up without a doubt.
Yeah.
Not just in the through the lens of I was a marketing professional and so I have access to kind of marketing roles within games that I can then move sideways through or meet people through that type of thing, but also just in general, as you said, like work life skills,
Mm.
like time management, like knowing what working a job feels like,
Yeah.
and having done interviews before and not being nervous about those types of things, or as you've already mentioned, understanding the pitfalls of those type of things. You fail and you learn from those failures, and a lot of the failures that maybe other aspiring game devs who are trying to break into the industry might not have been through yet, I have, and so I'm able to identify that. And I think mentoring as a whole, whether you're doing it on a one-on-one level, on a studio level, through like an organization like Limit Break, for example, or
Mm.
into games, they have mentors too. I think that all falls under like an umbrella, which I've called like direct support. Like you're working with an individual or a group of individuals, and you're helping directly make sure that or help them progress and get in and do whatever they need to do, and that could
Yeah.
be through a service, for example, like you want to check their portfolio, consult on that, or or maybe you're making content for people, whether it's a blog, a guide, a tutorial, a video on something that you're super experienced in. And I think that all of that can be really helpful, but ultimately is massively time consuming, as you've already said.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's one of the major barriers that a lot of experienced devs probably find in having the willingness to help out, but maybe not the time or the resources to actually make it happen. But before I move on from that, I think I wanted to ask, what are the most common things you asked about to help with from your students in particular?
um Most of my students ask me if they can come work at my studio.
So work experience,
they're bold, they're brave, and they're eager. Um, and as much as I would love to do that, there isn't the capacity.
Hmm.
Well, certainly not with what we're doing at the moment. But like, um, there was this thing I saw recently about like a pay it forward system because there's not enough like small paid entry roles. And the suggestion is that mid or lead seniors could offer up part of their job in order to create this space, which would also include giving up part of their wage
Interesting.
in order for them to be paid. Um, and I thought that it's such an innovative and
Yeah.
insanely generous thing to be able to do. I don't think a lot of people are in that position, but definitely, I think if we're able as an industry to start doing stuff like that, that would be amazing. But yeah, I think the key thing that they want is experience. I think a lot of them know that when you're trying to get into the industry and you're applying for these entry level jobs, there are people who have just done an entry level job, and so and they might not be doing that job anymore, and there are all these people who are adrift who have the same skill set as you or in roughly the same place as you, but they have that little bit of experience,
Mm.
and um,
Pip you to the post.
it just what employers it's a benefit, it's a free benefit for an employer if you've got experience doing the thing that you want to get into doing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so a lot of them just want to find ways of getting that experience. I've been explaining to them that the best way to do it is to go make some games yourself, make sure that your portfolio has some of that, but that again, that's not easy. There are game jams you can do and stuff like that.
Do you think that that's the best advice you can give them? Make something.
To make your yeah, absolutely. If you want, like, it's so much easier to get a job doing a thing if you're already doing the thing. um and I've kind of been doing that in my career, like in my creative career, from the beginning anyway. Whenever once I left art school, I wasn't sure how I was going to sell my art, so I started selling it on a market stall, just painting canvases on a market stall. And then when it came to like applying for like illustration jobs or similar things, the job that I got doing theatre and set design, where I was like painting massive planes of wood, I got that because I had been working on a market stall
Yeah.
painting. Um, so yeah, as much as possible, if you can prove that you do the thing before you're even paid to do the thing, and games, it's kind of so easy to do that with games. There's so many ways for someone to make a game
Yeah.
and to showcase their part of it. Um,
I
but
guess.
you then do come up against the key thing, which is making games is kind of hard.
No doubt. No doubt. And I think you've hit the nail on the head of what I, from my 9 months to a year of trying to break in, have taken away most from people trying to help me out, which is basically saying, why don't you just do a game jam and make some stuff, and then
Mm,
you can show off that not only you are able to do this, but that you actually like to do it, like you
yeah,
actively enjoy and want to do it. It's not just something that you feel like you'd like to do, but if you're doing it in your free time, it's proof that you kind of actively want to pursue it. And I think that in terms of advice, devs can deliver that 100% of the time to whoever they're speaking to, whoever's asking them questions about what they want to be doing or how to get in. And it leads quite nicely onto the next kind of subcategory of support that I think experienced devs can deliver to newcomers into the industry, which I put as like indirect support, where you help provide those opportunities for whether it be students or transitioners to get that experience, whether it's through organising events or organising networking events or game jams or whatever it might be. And I think Game Dev London is a great example of that in the sense that they worked with sponsoring a global game jam site, and you've done GDLX, you've done a game jam of your own in the end, and
Yep.
and I think what would be good to hear is how involved is that process of putting yourself in the position of being able to organize this type of thing and make this type of impact. What did it take, I guess?
It's a lot of work. And I think not a lot of people realize that we all do it for free. We have what's it called? A Buy Me a Coffee account, and I think we've had some donations there. But yeah, by and large, everything that we do is free. Obviously, you pay for tickets to the events, but most of that, if not all of that, goes on the event itself. So yeah, it's a lot of really passionate, dedicated people giving their time to help everyone else who's in either, if not a similar boat, like are in the boat that we used to be in. Like this whole trying to be part of the industry, and once you're in, passing that ladder down and just making sure that the door is open for everyone else. The events seem to happen in like a whirlwind of madness and creativity, and in some cases we're like with the space that we had at Samsung King's Cross. That was like it was like a lot of we had like a good relationship with them anyway, so that wasn't too difficult. Getting the tech set up, they were amazing actually, because they supplied all of the tech and their technicians. Obviously Samsung, so tech is kind of their thing.
That's their thing.
And even like the guest speakers, no one was paid to talk. No one was. We didn't charge anything for the indie studios that wanted to showcase their games. It's crazy how quickly it was like quite a few months of planning, and then it all just happened in like this whirlwind of like some emails across, and can you sign this, and then if you don't sign this we can't do the event, and we're like this is days away, could you not have told us sooner? The game jam, do you know what, I have to tip my hat to Adam, our co-founder Adam Boyne, because a lot of this stuff, he's like a genius when it comes to organizing things. So yeah, global game jam, doing a global game jam and having that all set up, a lot of that, almost all of it was Adam. And then by some miracle we became 8th globally, which was just awesome. But yeah, I don't really know how to. It's just something that like I say, we're all a bunch of creative, passionate people who believe that pay it forward is the only way. And we all do it for free, like madmen.
Like madmen indeed. And I think it's important to note that that's not achievable for one person, and or even maybe even a handful of people. I can't speak for you, but I can imagine organising something like GDL Expo is not a 1 to 5 man job. Like it's a big thing, and
it's pretty much the whole team, from the ideas that we have, and even on the day we had volunteers from within the community to like man the door, because obviously the rest of us were running around. I would call it backstage, but it was kind of, we were just in, you could see us running around everywhere. there was no backstage. Like myself or the panel guests getting mic'd up and then running around. It's literally takes everyone to chip in a little bit.
Well, the question is, what you managed to turn around GDL Expo in really, in the greater scheme, it feels like quite a moderate amount of time. A
Mm.
few months of planning, but with a large team, and then and that was from the ground up, really.
Yeah.
And I think that puts into perspective what is possible if you do have the will and the manpower to do it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can really take away in terms of if you want to make an impact to help the craft this community and help build this industry, that you really can organize something and make it happen if you really want to. But that said, I'm not here to put pressure on everyone out there to go away
Yeah.
and find 15 people and organize an expo. Like, that's not what this is about.
Yeah. It's definitely like if you can, you can, and if you can't, don't worry about
Yeah,
it. Like
absolutely,
because
absolutely.
there are people that can.
Yeah.
Um,
And for those that can't, there are other things you can do. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. I want to talk about ambassadorship for one,
okay.
like Women in Games ambassadorship and stuff like that, where you can do what I've described as diverted support, in a sense. So if somebody comes to you, and you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you can't deliver exactly what they're looking for, you know that you can send them to the right place.
Mm.
And you have the awareness and the knowledge to say, these are the best people that you should speak to. And you can do that in a number of different ways. For example, sending people to industry bodies, or organizations like Grads in Games, or Women in Games, or even GDL, communities that can support them in pursuing their goals. And I think that is where the majority of experienced devs sit, is that they really, you can only do so much, and there's no expectation for you to do anything at all, really, is the truth.
Yeah.
But having an awareness of what's going on in the industry so that you can say, well, actually, I can't help you out. If somebody comes to you, you can say, actually, I can't help you out. But I know that this group can, or I know that this individual can. That can make the world of difference too. And I think the main question I wanted to ask you about this was, in such like an interconnected industry, particularly with social media and just games as a whole feels like a very interconnected industry. What experiences have you had passing one person to somebody else and kind of directing them to somebody else? And what do you think is the best way of doing that? Because I imagine in my position, if I was an experienced dev and somebody's come to me and said, I'm really trying to get an opportunity with sound, and I know that I have a few friends who are really good with sound, I'm not 100% sure of how I'd go to them and say, look, I know this guy, and and he's interested in getting into sound. Like, do you want me to introduce him? Like, I'm not really sure how I would go about that, and I was wondering whether you could shed some light on how you would.
I mean, you kind of literally do that most of the time. And it is something like, yeah, redirecting people is something I have a lot of experience with anyway, especially when I was doing like boots on the ground at the Game Dev Lunch meetups. And initially, I wasn't doing it with any great intention. Like, it wasn't my intention to like speed date hook up people.
Yeah.
But just by nature of like the way that my brain works, I'd be talking to someone about something and then have a nice conversation with them, and then carry on networking in the room and talk to someone else, and then they mention that they're looking for someone with this certain thing that I was just talking about with someone else, and I go, oh, you should totally talk to this person, and literally walk them over and do the intro in person there. And that's like one of the best things you can, for me. Like, I actually really enjoy doing that at networking events, talking to people, finding out things, and not just networking for myself, but helping the smoothness of those interactions happen. And now, well, especially during the pandemic, it's kind of become quite normal for people to like reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm looking for an opportunity with X, can you help me out, whatever. And I go, unfortunately not. But let me hook up. And I do that a number of ways. Sometimes if I'm connected with them on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
well, especially if I'm connected with them both on LinkedIn, or if they approach me on LinkedIn, then I just do like I set up a DM between the three of us and do a little intro there. Otherwise, I do it by email.
Hmm.
Um, Fairly recently, I met with someone who does marketing and publishing, and like immediately I was like, oh, I know who you should be having a chat with.
Yeah.
And so I set up the email chain. And in the email chain, I'm kind of a bit more formal in email. So I do like a proper intro, like this is this person, they do this, and they're awesome for this reason. And then I go, and this is this person, and they do this, and they're awesome for that reason. You
Very
guys are going to
structured.
get on like a house on fire. Out. And then sometimes I get left within those email chains or those DM chains, and it's amazing. But most of the time, they take it away from from
Yeah.
that conversation
Yeah.
and have a private conversation amongst themselves. I guess it depends on the sensitivity and nature of the conversation. But it's really cool when I do get left in, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really going to work out for like, you know, for whatever reason.
Hmm. So, I mean, it feels like social media and in-person conversations are the main kind of go-tos, and you just do exactly what you'd expect to do, which is say, here, you two should have a conversation. This is who you are, and this is who you are, like a regular introduction. Um, I was actually gonna pull out the fact that you mentioned how over COVID it was slightly different, and how maybe that has changed what the approaches people take to this type of thing, and how in-person events differ to kind of digital exchanges, like how you said you're more formal in email and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I did want to ask how important you think it is for people to be attending industry events of all experiences, attending industry events to build those networks to either get into the industry or have the knowledge to assist others if they want to get into the industry. Do you think in person is
Yeah.
essential?
Um, Essential, no, but there is something about connecting with people in a real space with an environment with a vibe, and um, that just isn't the same by text messaging or email or even video call. Um, like I'm looking at you, but we're not making eye contact. Well, I'm either looking at your eyes down here on my screen, or I'm looking at my camera up there where there is lifelessness. um, and yeah, there's you. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we've met in person, and
Hmm.
so like our, our connection, I would imagine comes across in this episode here. But when you're meeting someone for the first time, there's I don't know what it is. There's just definitely it's almost like there's a uh, some other sense of when you're in the space with someone else. Um, Maybe yeah, your senses are just more heightened when you're in a physical space with someone, and I think that makes it a lot easier for you to read body language, and to have a lot less confusion about what was said. There's no IRL, there's no lag. So so that helps quite a lot. Um, so I do think that if someone can, then they should go to physical networking. Absolutely. Um, and I used to when I used to hear a lot when I first started doing this like networking, game dev networking stuff, that everyone is a certain type. Like you'd look at the people in this networking space, and you'd go, those people around the edges, those are the like shy creepers, and they'll probably stay around the fringes. And then you've got these people who have just started chatting, and um, they're being brave, but you can still see the awkwardness. And then you've got people who I'm probably one of at this point who's just like bopping around like it's their own, like where they live, and will happily chat to anyone. And then you've got these people who are all like industry and they're all chatting together. And I think that those aren't different people; those are just different places along the journey. Because I started out on the edges and being like, "Oh, I don't know who to talk to." Um, I very quickly shifted to the middle, but like you do start out with like I don't know who to talk to, I don't know how to engage with people, and then you have a few awkward conversations with people, and you just get better at it. You get better at like um, not only being less awkward yourself, but helping people be comfortable and like if they are being a little bit awkward with you, you can learn how to like not make light of it, but certainly like help them adjust
Yeah.
or make it like it's not even a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it's all cool. We're all a bit awkward and we're a bit funky and funny or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think that if you're worried about doing these types of things, just give it a go.
Yeah.
You might start out creeping at the edges, but you never know. You could be bouncing around as mad as I am.
And I think that I think that's a message. That's a message that can resonate with all levels of experience. Really, I'm sure there are many out there who have spent many years in the industry and not really been drawn to in-person events, but for whatever reason, including maybe they consider themselves like not particularly comfortable in social situations, but we can all play a part in helping those people feel more comfortable and get the most out of those scenarios. But I think we've highlighted a lot of interesting ideas for what not just what experienced devs can do to help those trying to get in, but also what those trying to get in can do to help themselves, and what maybe they can ask for and seek assistance with, and what expectations they should have. Because I think this might be actually a good question for you, whether you have ever had somebody come to you for help and maybe have unrealistic expectations about what you can do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think most people do. Like when you start out, your expectations they're never. I wouldn't say that they're always like too high, but
Mhm.
they're normally not in the right place. Um, you'll enter, or when you're trying to enter into the game dev industry, you'll have preconceptions. Like some people have this idea of what a gamer is, or some people have this idea of what a geeky, nerdy game dev is, and um, sometimes you have an idea of a game dev and you think that they're the rock star game dev. There are all these like ideas of what people think it's going to be, and you're probably wrong most of the time. It's mostly grey. We're mostly all somewhere in the middle. Um, but if ever your expectation is that one that causes fear or anxiety, then the best thing you can do is just realize that you're probably wrong,
Mhm.
and that if it's stopping you from having a go, try not to let it stop you having a go.
Mhm.
Try and like take a deep breath and jump on in. The water is cold; it absolutely is cold, but you get used to it. It's one of those. Um, and I don't mean that like the environment is cold. I mean, it's whenever you try and do something new or step into something new, there's always this like little bit of a oh Jesus Christ, like it's a bit of a shock to the
Yeah.
system. But we're human beings. We acclimatize. We adapt. That's what the human race has been phenomenally good at.
No doubt. No doubt. I guess I think a good a good query is what do you think that those being asked for help can do to manage those expectations and those ideas that people are coming to them with, to make sure yeah, you're coming to me for help and I'm willing to help you, but you know I can only do so much, and I need to make that clear from the outset and set those boundaries. Even particularly at a mentorship level, I'm aware, like, I'm currently trying to become a mentor at my university, and there's a lot of conversations we're having about setting boundaries with your mentor, and how much time of yours they can take up and stuff like that.
Mm.
How have you found treading that line, either with students, with your mentee, with whatever it might be?
So, um, I'm probably not a great example, just because I I give as much as I can, j and probably sometimes I give a bit too much, and
Hmm.
um, which is a weird thing to think about. But yeah, in terms of actually setting boundaries, like I do simple things, like if they say, "Oh, have you got an hour this week?" and I go, "No," and that's literally not, I will blurt that out because in my head I'm like, "No, I actually don't."
Mm.
It's not. I'm not trying to set any kind of boundary. It's just a fact of reality. Um, but like today's a good example because I had some free time today. Um, well, I say some free time. I had my lunch break, and I knew that during my lunch break, I would just be sitting there eating on my own. So I messaged my mentee, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm free if you are free to chat." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." I was like, "If you don't mind me eating in your face, like that's totally going to be a thing." And they were like, "No, well, uh, I don't want to interrupt your lunch." I was like, "Meh, who needs
Okay,
to?"
I see.
Yeah, I think everyone probably has their own idea of um, where their boundaries should be. Um, I'm a fairly boundaryless person, um, but if I just don't have the time, then I just don't have the time, and I'm quite happy to let people know. But I don't do any of that like
Yeah.
presetting or the kind of thing that you would expect when you go see a counselor, where they go, okay, here's what this session is about. Here's what we're going to be talking about. Let's try and stay within those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's none of that. It's just like, hey, Stu, are you free? I'm like,
Yes
maybe
or
next
no?
week or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay. I see. I see. That's. I mean, I feel like I would. I'm also struggling to add to that because I'm quite similar to you in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, in that, if somebody were to ask me for help, I would probably be pretty liberal with my time in terms of,
Mm.
unless I'm incapable. That said, I completely agree with the idea of, ultimately it's a personal choice about,
Hmm.
and understanding your own needs, making sure that your needs are being placed with equal or more value, to those of the people that you're helping. You can't help people if you're not 100% anyway,
Yeah.
and that those boundaries are key to making sure that you are. Um, but yeah, I think we've covered a lot of interesting things, and this is probably a good place to put the conversation to rest. I think it's clear that there's a lot of different things that devs can do to help those trying to break in, and also a lot of things that those trying to break in can do to help themselves and to help ensure
I
they're
think
making the
one,
most of
yeah,
it.
I think one of the things that like, if you're trying to get into the industry, be bold, be brave, reach out,
Yeah.
ask someone, dive into the Game Dev London Discord as an example, um, um, and or any other community actually. Like you say, there's whatever community feels comfortable for you. Um, just try and reach out and speak to someone. Um, don't feel like you know then no one's going to be willing to talk to you because I exist, you exist. there's 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 surprisingly like yeah, I think the thing is, when I said like when I was first starting out, I felt very lonely. I think probably part of that is part of that journey that I didn't know the people that I could or should be talking to. Um, and it's entirely possible that how I felt at the beginning was just my own, like, oh, I don't, I was on the fringes. I'm on the edge. I don't know. Didn't have all the connections that I could have had at that point. And it's only now that I'm like Mr. Networking Madman that like I know everyone that I know. Um, so yeah, if you're just starting out, um, try and be brave, take a bit of a plunge. And if you've been in the industry 10 years or more, then try and keep an eye out for those that look like they're on the fringes and like are struggling to step in. And if someone does come to you, um, and you feel like you can't give them any advice or you're not able to help them in any way, send them my way. I'll quite happily have a chat.
Wow, you heard it here first. You heard it here first. If you have any
My inbox
questions,
is my inbox is inundated all the time. It's fine.
Stuart Deville at Stuart Deville on Twitter. Wait, that's it's your point. You're meant to be plugging that. That's my I stolen that from you. Sorry. But with that said, thank you for coming on here and chatting to me about this, Stu, and thanks to everyone who's been listening this far. You can check out Game Dev London at Game Dev London on Twitter. You should also join the Discord, as we've already said multiple times. It's a great place to talk about all of these things and get engaged in workshops, in-person meetups, all sorts. So before I go, Stu, would you like to plug anything in particular outside of your availability to consult on different things?
Just the usual, which is mostly Game Dev London stuff. GameDev.London. Like I say, you can join the Discord, gamedev.london/Discord. Check out the podcast that you're listening to right now. We have way more episodes. gamedev.london/podcast. We have a Twitch. We're on all the socials. I don't know what's going on Facebook anymore. Do people do Facebook anymore? Probably not. But yeah, my door is always open. Always DM me. And congratulations for your first podcast episode. How did it feel?
All good. All good.
Nice.
Yeah, like a friendly chat. All right. In that case, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.